I wanted to make this video as a resource for those who are walking their spiritual path alone. Oftentimes the idea of spiritual awakening is immediately conceptualized as this beautiful end state wherein we have discovered the truth of our being and cultivated an enduring inner peace. Yet the road to get there is often filled with unexpected twists, turns, and potholes. We need to honestly acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of the population is completely disconnected from the true depths of awakening or enlightenment. We are largely walking it on our own by default. Not only is the world largely unaware of these depths, but our societal and social systems actively and unconsciously disrupt the awakening process. As we turn within, the outside world can start to look increasingly superficial and empty. Very easily, we can form a distinction between our spiritual lives on the one hand and the superficial, illusory external world on the other. For myself, I found that balancing between these two seemingly contradictory realities is part of the awakening process. In this video, I'd like to share my perspective on how we may overcome these feelings of loneliness. Each perspective gets increasingly existential in nature. My hope is not to provide you with some absolute answer though, but instead to help spark and inspire your own reflections and contemplations into this very common phase on the spiritual path. At the end of the day, you are your own best authority and source of wisdom. I hope you enjoy. The first thing that I would like to offer when it comes to feeling lonely on the spiritual path is that it's okay to go out and try to find a community of like-minded individuals. If we're feeling lonely, that doesn't necessarily have to mean that we continue to be alone. This might be a sign that somewhere inside of us, we are seeking to find that tribe. We are seeking to find those people, those individuals, those souls that we resonate with. And so I think it's important not to necessarily ignore the call to go out and try to find community. You know, there are a lot of different opportunities out there. There are meditation centers that we can go to. There are online meditation sitting groups or just, Zoom meetings, Discords that you can find online to connect with other people. There are internet forums. So there's a lot of different ways that we can connect and find community. And I think perhaps when we are in a rut, when we are feeling lonely, and especially a loneliness that is derived out of the spiritual path, I think that can sometimes blind us in a sense to realizing that the world is wide open and there are opportunities everywhere. And if one of those opportunities that we are seeking to find is related to finding community, well, all it takes is for us to set that intention and to go find it. There's a really cliche saying that I almost hesitate bringing up, but I'm going to bring it up because I thought of it. It's the whole saying, where focus goes, energy flows. And that saying applies in this circumstance just as much as any other. When we set that intention, when we set a focus towards finding other people, finding like-minded individuals, oftentimes the universe will reward that intention. It will reward that focus by attracting the circumstances, the conditions, and the internal mental states needed to actualize those goals. I don't want to get too metaphysical here or too out there, but suffice to say that if you look across history, a lot of the great individuals out there, like they have ideas in their mind and then they go with an extreme focus and vision and actualize those goals. It's not an accident. And we kind of do that every day with just living life on a microcosm. So not to get too far off on a tangent, but when we do set intentions, the universe rewards those efforts. And in this case, if we are feeling lonely, I think it's important not to ignore that call, that feeling inside of us that wants to connect with others, that is seeking a spiritual sangha of some kind, or a soul tribe or a tribe. I mean, you could call it whatever you'd like, but just seeking that community. So we can't forget when we are feeling lonely that it's okay to go off and try to find friends, to make that intention, to take action. And granted, I know that it's difficult when we are sort of in the middle of these negative mental states, but We cannot forget the freedom that is reality and the opportunities that are around us. Yet, on the other hand, there is sort of the inverse of what I just suggested, which is that we actually embrace the solitude and embrace the loneliness. One of the deepest treasures and rewards by truly taking this whole spirituality thing to its limit, by getting really serious with meditation, contemplation, reflection, turning within and studying the mind, studying the ways that the mind and perception construct our view of reality, by studying the relativistic nature of how we interpret the world, how we can interpret things as negative or we can interpret things as positive, and how these two dualities are both available in every moment. And when we start to get extremely intimate with the ability to look at reality in a multitude of different ways, we can start to see that loneliness and solitude don't have to be negative, but we can actually embrace these things as positive and joyful circumstances. And like I said, one of the most beautiful things about the spiritual path is this opening up into our own solitude, like opening up to the inner world, so to speak. The inner world, our inner experience, provides some of the most beautiful, blissful, and rewarding, intrinsically rewarding experiences that life has to offer, things that the external world could never match. I mean, we can generate happiness and fulfillment by just breathing, by just paying attention to our breath. We can find some of life's highest joys. And that is powerful stuff, man, and it's not an exaggeration. So when we are feeling alone, in addition to going out and seeking community, one of the very viable strategies that we can employ is by facing it, by really turning within, not turning away from the loneliness, but actually turning our attention into it and reinterpreting it, reconceptualizing it, recontextualizing it, and turning it into a wonderful thing. Because, I mean, it really is a wonderful thing. And for myself, one of the byproducts actually of, taking things like meditation extremely seriously and practicing very rigorously is like, I actually value my alone time much more than I used to. I see how valuable that it really is. And even though I have had very extreme moments of feeling isolated and feeling lonely, especially given the fact that we've just gone through a year of a global pandemic, I've certainly had moments where I felt incredibly alone. But on the other hand, when we start to be able to access these experiences, these states, when we start to see how our view of reality is open to interpretation, one of the byproducts is that we do start to truly cherish and value our alone time. And so I guess I say all that to say, if you are feeling lonely, if any of us are feeling lonely, sometimes it's by just turning within that loneliness that the solution arises. It arises at a deeper level of the solitude than the solitude that we're experiencing at the moment of feeling lonely. The interesting thing about the nature of emotions, and this is something that I'm still studying, still learning about, still observing within myself, and it's a very, very profound stance on emotions. But that's that we are actually creating our emotions moment by moment, or there is sort of a volitional, willful component to emotions, such that if we want to feel happy, we can generate happiness in the blink of an eye. Like, we can literally intrinsically generate feelings of happiness or feelings of joy, or conversely, feelings of loneliness, feelings of depression, feelings of sadness. This is a complicated topic because it's not really the paradigm that most of us walk around with when it comes to emotions. But emotions are serving a particular self-image that we have of ourselves. And so if we are caught in the story of, I am feeling lonely, I am feeling depressed because of this solitude and isolation, we actually start reinforcing those emotions of loneliness. And in a sense, we are creating those emotions by believing in the stories that we are telling ourselves. But again, kind of going back to what I had just discussed, all of these views are completely relative and open to interpretation. So we don't actually have to be telling the story of, I am an isolated being feeling alone. We could tell a different story. We could tell a more powerful story, such as, I am walking the spiritual path and going through a period of turning within. And merely by shifting that story, the emotional associations with them change. And so we can start to generate different emotional orientations merely by changing the way that we are interpreting our situations. But it actually goes even deeper than that, which is that even beyond having to tell a story one way or another, when we start to get very trained with our nervous system because of things like meditation or contemplation and reflection, observation of the mind, of the emotional system, of the thoughts, of our body's sensations, when we start to study very deeply the interconnection of all of these things, we actually start to hone, train, sharpen the ability to generate our feelings, our emotions. It's almost like we become an actor of ourselves. Like an actor, when they're on stage performing, can generate the emotional orientation that they need to perform the role that they are acting out. It's actually the exact same mechanism that's going on with us. It's just that because we take our ego stories as actuality, as being real, that we think we are powerless to change them. But when we actually can study the ego, the nervous system, in a very, very trained, concentrated way, we see that our egos and the life circumstances that we are playing out every single day are actually just an act, in a sense. So like the actor on stage, we are on the stage of reality, we are on the stage of the universe, and similarly, we can, on a dime, flip our emotional state to something else. We can radically change our state of consciousness. But see, this takes a lot of practice and an open-mindedness to the possibility that we are responsible for generating our loneliness, and then therefore we can snap out of it just as easily as we are creating the loneliness in the first place. So we can just switch to a different emotional state that's more helpful and more powerful for whatever given situation that we're in. Now, again, this is an incredibly advanced possibility, I would say, and it's not something that I've personally mastered myself, but because I am open to that possibility and have actually seen masters in person doing this kind of stuff, you know, I hold that as being possible and have practiced it myself. So I would just say, I know that it, again, when we're stuck in the feelings of loneliness, this can seem absurd, impossible, completely outlandish that we could generate happiness on demand and stop feeling the loneliness, but it is possible. It is possible to do if we hold that possibility. The next perspective that I would like to share is just that the nature of all experience and all reality is empty. This is a pretty heavy Buddhist topic. So if you're into Buddhism, this might resonate. If you're not, this might sound like some more crazy stuff that, and I don't mean for it to, you know, I don't mean for it to sound outlandish. I'm actually speaking very literally that reality is empty. And what emptiness means is that reality is absolutely free. We are living in a reality, in a universe that is completely and utterly free. And so when we recognize the emptiness of all things, we see that, one, that's why everything is impermanent. That's why things are constantly changing, shifting, morphing moment by moment. In the subtlest of ways, no moment is the same as the prior moment. And it's really all happening in one moment anyways. There's just one moment that is reality. But all of the appearances, and so therefore all of our feelings, emotions, memories, our self, our ego, our life, perhaps even our death, is all empty, meaning that it's all impermanent. It's just a passing cloud in the sky. When we start to open up to this emptiness, when we start to study the arisings and the passings of our experiential view of reality, of our perceptions and of our life story, when we can embrace that emptiness, that impermanence, and apply it to not just loneliness, but any negative situation that we find ourselves within, we can actually take refuge within that freedom of emptiness, the freedom and liberation that emptiness provides. In practical terms, what this would mean is keep meditating, keep watching and reflecting on the fact that all of this it's like quicksand, just passing by, and nothing is going to stay the same. In a year, these feelings that we're experiencing are going to be gone. In a moment, these feelings that we're experiencing are gone. Like, the more deeply that we can touch this emptiness, the more deeply that we can see that there is no solidity to reality, the more liberated that we become from all of these types of negative feelings and negative mental states. And the more that we actually come to be at peace from them, the more that we are able to hold them in our awareness without pushing or pulling. And the same thing goes for positive mental states as well. So when we do this, we start to enjoy positive mental states even more, and we start to allow the negative mental states to just run their course. And we don't judge them, we don't push them away, we don't demonize them, we just accept them as being part of life, because we see that, similar to all of life, it's just empty, boundless, and free. So as we actually move into this emptiness, a very strange paradox starts to arise, which is that we start to feel a very deep unity with all of life. We start to see that the nature of ourselves within this emptiness is actually deeply connected to the whole, that there is no, that the feelings of separation themselves, the feelings that we are an isolated, lonely, individualized being, is actually just a interpretive view of the world, and that view itself is also empty and therefore relative and something that we can let go of, something that we can surrender. It's not actually inherent to the way that things really are. It's a view that we've been conditioned with by our society, by our family, just by growing up in the time that we were growing up in. But that this view is not bad, that necessarily, but that it is empty. And as we study this emptiness, as we directly experience this emptiness, we actually see that because the feelings of isolation and separation are empty, there's nothing left but unity, that everything is interconnected, that everything is not separate from itself. Like when we're studying our experiential field, like just sight, taste, touch, sound, smell, we can notice that all of those phenomena are occurring within the same space of consciousness or the same space of awareness. And so when we're looking at a tree, for example, and we're feeling ourselves, our egos, we can notice that the sense of ego and that tree are occurring in the same space simultaneously. And even that the feeling of separation is also occurring in that same space simultaneously. And so even though the form, even though the ego, even though the tree, even though the feeling of separation are themselves this impermanent flux of experience, because, the moment that we walk away from the tree, there is no tree anymore, the tree is gone, so that visual field has shifted, and of course the ego is constantly changing, thoughts are arising, passing, emotional states are fluctuating, all of that. So those are changing as well. We can notice that the underlying space in which everything is occurring does not change. It is an enduring, permanent facet of our direct experience. This actuality of consciousness, this intrinsic knowing of our own existence, this I amness, this does not shift, this does not change, this remains. And while the form that plays out in this formless awareness is empty, we see that the formlessness is actually completely full and unifies all things. Now, I say all this to say, like, what the hell does this have to do with loneliness? I say all this to say that when we are feeling lonely, when we are feeling at our lowest, when we are feeling completely isolated and disconnected from the world, we have to go deeper. We have to see more deeply into the disconnection. We have to see how we are creating it. We have to see its emptiness. And we have to see that the space in which it is occurring is a deeper, more absolute view of reality in ourselves. And when we can step into that, it opens up into this massive unifying interconnectivity. There's someone walking up there. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm in a trail right now. Anyways, when we can open up to that view, that pretty much solves all of our problems when it comes to these feelings of isolation, because we see that we're not isolated at all. We're not isolated one bit. We are connected to everything and everyone. And it no longer matters whether we are physically alone or not, because we have an intrinsic and intuitive understanding that we are deeply connected with every part of reality, that we are connected with every part of this universe, because the universe arises out of and within this formless field of consciousness and awareness. Everyone always thinks that we are in the universe, but fails to see that actually the universe is inside of us. Like, as a matter of experience, we can see that, oh, wait a second, like, this world is inside of my experience. So even though I can interpret my perception as, oh, I'm inside of it, we can also interpret perception just as equally and just as validly that, oh, this is inside of me. And when we do that, yeah, we just open up to this massive amount of interconnectivity. So that's really all I had to say on this matter. Please know that what I'm talking about, like, I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's feelings or make it sound like they are completely 100% responsible. I mean, there are a lot of factors at play here. And again, as I said in the intro, I'm not trying to say that this is the absolute answer, that everything that I talked about is like the solution, that it is like the answer and absolutely true. I'm just trying to offer a perspective, a beginning, an opening, and a reflection for your own contemplation and insight. And so even though what I have said has resonated with myself, it's come from my own experience, and that's all I can offer. Even though that is the case, my hope is that you can use this to more deeply understand your own experience and come to your own conclusions, because again, you are your own best source of authority and wisdom. So that's pretty much all I had to say. If you like this video, please hit that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. It helps spread it to other people. If you like this style of content, please subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, reflections, ideas, please leave them in the comment section below. It helps not only you and me, but it also helps anyone that happens to watch the video and read through the comments. So that's pretty much all I had to say. And until next time.